right button. I have everything pre-built because I didn't feel like typing a whole lot. A bitty keyboard here. So I just have a database project. It was just add new project, SQL Server project. That's all that it was. I didn't add any tables to it because I'm going to be focusing on this thing, which is the actual T4 file that's doing it. In your Server Explorer, I just have a server, a database, and I'll get it connected to Azure. But I just have SQL Server, no databases in it at all, so it's just fresh installed this morning. You would right click and you could just publish the database. I just have everything pre-built, so I can just publish and it'll go through and it'll do everything for it. And this actually what it did is it built the database. I can't zoom that in, unfortunately. But the T4 file actually told it that I wanted to create 4 tables. They have relationships between them so that you have a vehicle and the vehicle can have passengers, and the vehicle can also have cargo. And then I just added some extra information just for the heck of it, just so I'd have more fields to show. And I will try to go over the other parts, the other applications. Like I created a helper to parse an XML file to give me an object model that I could quickly iterate through to generate from the tables, and just some test applications. Any questions? If I can answer them, I will.
So is that intended to simply set up a structured database, or also load the data in for it as well?
It can. A database project, you can actually run a script after it deploys and populate the tables.
Okay.
If you have like lookup table or information that you want.
Okay, so the T4 is there to help you build the structure of the database.
Yeah, the T4 is, for me, it's just for structure. You could do it for the table values if you really wanted to. The T4 will actually let you run arbitrary .NET code, and it just outputs it to the source code file that it's generating. Like when you create a project like WPF or something, there's always like an extra file that's not generated, that is being generated by a T4 template behind the scenes, so it gets regenerated. Well, that came out nice. It looks like old style ASP, the way they wrote it. So you always start your file with the bracket and the pound symbol, and then the @ for directives. That basically tells it that this is what to do. So you have a template. Debug gives you more information than what you normally would get. So when you write your T4 file, and you will have errors, you can actually tell you which line it is instead of saying an error happened. This is what you'd get otherwise. You can specify the language. C# is there. VB is also available. I went with C#. I know everyone here likes C#. And then the output, you tell it what you want the extension to be renamed. It'll start with a T4 file. It'll use your base file name, and it'll replace the .tt with whatever you specify here. So if you're writing, you're going to be writing SQL codes, I'm going to end up with a .SQL. I also put a .generated in there, so you kind of know that you didn't write this, so any changes you make are going to go away. But it also works, T4 also works in the C# project the same way. It just, this stuff happens before the compile runs. Actually, every time you save the T4 file, or you manually tell it run custom tool, it will go through and rebuild your source code and dump it in this generated file. For me, what I have this assembly reference because I have some helpers that I wanted to bring in to use. And then I have to bring in my namespace in order to use them, or else I get to type it all out. If it's not in these brackets, the code will be it's just echoed out to the output file. There's no change to it. Okay. Touchpad. If you have a standard control block, it's just the brackets with a pound sign, and then just standard code that you would write in C# or whatever language you chose. You have expressions, like you can do with well, they're similar to like Razor expressions. So it's the bracket, pound, and then an equal, and then some expression, and that one you don't need to terminate. And finally, you have class features. What T4 file actually does is it generates a custom class with a single method in it. It's called write. And then what this class feature does, it lets you create other methods that you can call from the main. This all has to live at the bottom of the file, because otherwise you have your method, and then you have another method signature inside of it. And that they didn't build too many sparks into here for it. So this is just an example where it's like, oh, you can generate another day from a past in day, and I actually use that in the expression to dump out the day and then the other day, 4 days later. This doesn't do anything. That's all it was doing. Nothing useful. But that is actually all that's in a T4. It's either echoing information directly, or you're doing statements, and then you have a write method that you can call. That's brought from a base class. A write and write line. You can do indenting, so you don't have to keep track of it. These are just methods that you can call on it, and the write, the under your base class will handle it for you. You can actually look at the generated code. It's going to be in your temp folder on your computer. And it'll be a messy file name. And it builds a DLL so that it can be hosted by Visual Studio. Then you can go over the T4 file. The same thing, I just had one. So it's basically the same start as what we had in the other slide. It's just I have a T4 file, I'm generating C#, I'm going to output it, I want generated.sql, I have my reference, and I am importing. I want to resolve an XML file that I have so that I can read it. Then my helper is doing this, like it's creating a document from a path, so it's going through parsing the XML document, give me it strongly typed. And then for each one, I'm just generating, tell it, create the table. And then I will just go ahead and create all of the fields for the table. If I have primary keys, I'll add the constraints for it. If I have foreign keys, I'll add the constraints for those. And that's all that it's doing. It's just creating tables.
So it's really creating the SQL to create the tables.
Yes.
Right.
And it actually, when you look at it, you have the tables, and then you have the generated. And that's, so I have like, my XML file has vehicles, I have ID, and then make, and model, and comment, and that's a primary key. Passengers, I just have, you have a name, if they're a driver, which vehicle are they in? So then I define the primary key and a foreign key on it. Cargo items, that's the same thing. Just they're just entries that I have in my XML document.
And how do you know, or how do you determine whether it's a var car 20, var car 50?
That's coming straight out of my document here, my structure.
Oh, cool.
So basically, I say I have a table, it's named vehicles. I have fields. Those are the fields, and I just gave it. It's a contrived example. It's not. It's close to what I'm using in production. Then children tables, like so it knows that I have another table reference. That table belongs to the parent, so that it automatically would create the foreign key reference for me. Same with cargo items. The cargo items is where I added the attributes. So you gotta say just arbitrary name value things to go with the cargo. And that's all that I did with it. So it's basically just reading this file, make a determination, and building a source code file that it can compile. And that's where all of those tables came from that I have here. So I have a vehicle that has the same columns that were specified, but it just built them. The strength for me is that I have this single object model. It works in the database. I can then also turn around and create objects in C#. So I have all the layers talking about the same things. So I can try not to repeat everything. I think that's just what the next one was.
So you use the same code to create your database and your C# objects then?
Yes.
Okay.
So
and you can modify them later on, and you can modify both the objects in the database.
Yeah, I just go into that one XML file. It's just linked. You know, both projects will read from the same file. And if I change something, it will go ahead and change what its output is, because it's reading the file every time it compiles.
Which data contracts are guaranteed.
Right. It's for me, it was to have a table that has like 100 payload fields on it. And I know I'm going to make mistakes if I'm manually typing this stuff. Between the database layer, store procedures that are selecting it or writing it, the application layer that has to, oh, which order were the freaking fields? I got one out of order one time. Nobody noticed it for 6 months. Shows how much they used it, but but I had fields swapped. This way it can enforce it. So everything is talking the same language. And if I just have to worry on the structure of it and let the busy work happen on its own. And yet, dry, don't repeat yourself. So if you have objects in your application, your database, you can use any framework as well. This is just a different way of doing it so that things live separate. Someone else can work on an XML document and it just works between different projects. And the less I have to type is the better. Because 100 fields, 100 properties, times 3. So it saved me time. And that's pretty much all I had for T4. I would love questions because I don't know.
Is there a way to pass a variable in without having like a hard reference to an XML document or something? Can you like maybe from command line say run this T4 using information?
It is supposed to. I didn't research that one. You are supposed to be able to pass in things to the T4 file.
Okay.
You don't really get a whole lot because you just have a custom tool, and that's all you get
Right.
in there. So it has to get it from somewhere. And when you're running it, it happens when you save this T4 file or when you tell it to run the custom tool. And that's it. You could probably get it from project variables because there is a part on here where I said it's host specific. It's true. That means that there will be a host property available to me, and it happens to be the Visual Studio environment, which has a method called resolve path that I'm using, so I don't have to have the hard coded path to the full name, just the name, the simple name. So when I move it somewhere else, I don't have to change every time, which does not work in the assembly. So I still had to do that part.
What are you writing? You're writing the T4 file, the XML file. What are you actually writing first and then updating?
Well, when I was developing it, I started with an idea for the XML file that I wanted, and then I would go back through and it was just iterative.
Right.
So I'd go through and I'd say, okay, I added this functionality. How do I put this in the create table statements? So I would try to manually do a create table. This is how I want it to look. So I start with an example, and then what are the pieces that I can take out of my hard coded that are being read from code, which was what I did. You know, the create table. That's just hard coded. You know, then I just knew that my code, I like to put an indentation in it. I need to know if I'm in the second line, so if I need to put a comma for the next field. And then it's just dumping the fields out. So like I have just the raw name. Oops. Just the raw name of the field. I'm adding some padding to it just to make things line up. And I dump out the SQL type, which is just another field coming out of that file.
And you wrote this by hand then? This was not machine generated?
This is me.
Okay.
Yeah, I wrote this part.
What about the XML document?
I wrote the XML document.
Okay.
My object model, I had to write my object model.
Sure.
So, you know, basically it's like, okay, I have nullable or not nullable. I could have just baked that into the SQL type, but maybe further down the road, I want to just examine the SQL type like on the C sharp side. If it's nullable, well, I need to make sure that it's a reference. If it's not null, you know, I can change how I'm generating code.
Okay.
If it's an int and it's null, I need to make sure to make it a nullable int.
Martin, did you already show how to generate the files from T4?
Actually generating, like adding a new T4.
Or just running the custom, yeah.
I want to see the classes.
You want to see the classes? These are my helpers. All I have a document. I have a default namespace so that I can read the XML file. I gave overloads, like read it from a path, read it from a string, an XML string, read it from an XML document, and then from an X document. Each one just basically calls the other one. Then internally, it's just like the add tables. I'm just reading it, the XML table or the XML document, and just building my strongly typed version of it, of that XML. It's really all that I'm doing in this method. So I just Boolean values in XML, you're allowed 0, 1, yes, no, true, false. So I just said, okay, they're an attribute, they're a string. Let me just go ahead and try to figure out what it could be. Is all that I'm doing. And I'm allowing implied values for like a default value on an attribute for some of them. Some of them like defaultable, nullable, yeah, for data fields. Not supposed to, I know. Everyone says no nulls ever, but I know sometimes. And then I just added some optimization, so when I read a table and I'm done doing it, everything is there. It never goes back and reparses the XML document. So that's all I'm doing on it.
Do you then check in like the generated files, the generated code, or
The generated code, no.
Okay.
Because it'll rebuild it in Visual Studio. Like I can go through and just delete the file. It's gone. But then I can, come on. I really don't like this laptop. Okay, what did it do? run custom tool, you're gonna get a prompt at first, because, you know, this has unlimited access to your computer. But I reran it, and it regenerates the file. So if I made any changes to these, this one actually gave me an error on this one. Because the source code file is not the same for my helper. So it threw the error when I was trying to compile it. Make sure it builds. Well, I need to. There. Now it should run. And it will actually take time because it's going to have to recompile. So now I have all my SQL code in there that I luckily did not type.
Now, are you able to generate the script from a command line?
The T4 generation.
Yeah, the generation.
It could be done. I believe there's a build task, so you can do it through build. There's an extension to Visual Studio Code that will also run it. I'm not sure, but I believe that the actual T4 generator tool is built into the .NET framework, or it's a redistributable. The text templating file generator.
Is it built in the core?
It'll be in one of the framework tools, or like one of the SDK tools.
Oh, okay.
It won't be built into core itself, but like in order to do the compile, that part will be there. I'm not sure where it's located for the command line. Command line should actually accept like the executable and then the path to the file, and then it should just be happy to go. It will throw an error on this one because I'm telling it I want to run it in Visual Studio.
Right.
I'm doing it in the host.
Mm.
If I was running it in VS Code, there is no host. There is no VS env DTE object for it. So that would be null, and that would throw a reference at runtime here. And for this one, there is actually a runtime. Like if I just go ahead and I purposely make a spelling error, I'm going to run the tool. You actually get an error that happens when it tries to run the code.
Right.
If I turned it to false, I wouldn't be able to get back into here. It wouldn't tell me that that's where the error was. It was just, you have a problem in your file. So if I do that, and line 1 now, so it won't even tell me where the error happened.
Right.
Says, yeah, something happened. Thanks for trying. That's what you get out of it. So now it goes back and it tells me where it was, where my error was, and you can actually view that. We'll just open up Notepad. I want to open another instance. Really bad laptop. So it generates, that's the code that it generated based on my T4 file that I fed it. So it puts in the pragmas so that it knows where the errors are happening. because I told it to do that.
And you
Wherever.
this writing SQL, it can actually write any kind of data, so it could
Yep.
write it out in HTML file.
Correct.
Write it out, and
Yep.
you've got parameters you can replace.
It's just text. It
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking we used it to build the context from the database, for the database.
all it is doing is saying, okay, based on my file, I'm going to output a file. And that's the telling it to change the extension to a .SQL tells your project that it's going to be a SQL file. If I said it was .text, which when you adding a T4, by default, it's always .text. That's what everyone wants to generate when you're doing T4. So you notice it now it's generated a text file. So if I compile my project, it's not going to do anything because this is just going to be ignored. Like, great, have a text file in there.
Would you use T4 template to do anything other than database stuff, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, text files.
Files. You could actually go through, and if you wanted to enumerate something like if you had property 1 through 100, customization, you could do a T4 file in C# or VB or any language because it's just text that is outputting. You could output XML as long as you make sure that you're generating it in the correct format, or JSON, or whatever format you want. You're responsible to make the text formatted correctly on the output side.
Yeah, I didn't write it, but I think every time I've used it, it would go to the database and pull the stuff back and then generate your context classes.
Yeah. You can do that because
Yeah, that's how I use it too.
you're in this source. You're just in the C#. You're in a method. Go ahead and you can create a new database connection and you can call. You can do anything you want in there.
And then it builds the context back.
Yeah. So then you could just do a select star, and then it's just what you're outputting. All the debug.write lines. You're doing the same thing here. You're just doing a write line. That's all it does behind the scenes.
Like I'm thinking, if you had a web application and you wanted to upload one of your schema XML files and build a script, for example, could you build during runtime?
You could. You can actually, T4s can run at design time or at runtime. You can actually build a T4 and it's just going to generate a class. That's all it's going to be. And it'll accept a path or string, I believe, as your input. And then it's going to create a stream for the output. What you do with it at that point is up to you. You can go back into that temp class that it built. That's what it generates. It generates a method called transform text. That's all it's doing. And it happens to be everything that I'm doing in there with calls to write. So it replaces all the hard-coded text with just method calls. And the write is just the base class is saying, okay, I'm going to write it to some output stream. And the default is to go ahead and write to a file. It just figured that out. That's all it does. Creates a host property because I told it was host specific. It created a method, or this one doesn't create a method because I just did it all in one. If I use the class properties, basically you would see another method under there that will show up, so that you're in your transform method, you can call like a helper method, but you can't. You probably don't want to create new classes and do everything embedded underneath it. That's why I went with another assembly with all of the helpers for me. That I could also then turn around and run through some unit tests which I did in VB, just out of spite. So it's just basically I test the load, I can test whether or not it has specific elements that I'm expecting for this sample document. So that's all I was doing. It was basically I was testing my extension methods that I put in. Yeah, I think I even did those all in VB also. Just so everyone gets to enjoy a little VB too.
Thanks.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So it's really early.
Is this project out on GitHub or?
It's on a flash drive right now.
So we'll put it out on GitHub?
Sure.
Awesome.
We'll get it out there.
Just use SneakerNet, it'll get there.
Yep, it'll go out.
Yeah, I know, like, you were talking about wanting to put together some D4 templates for some boilerplate stuff, right?
Yeah, I was thinking about it, and then just during this, I was thinking markdown documentation for public APIs. Because you're just throwing in generic junk anyway, so why not script it? And then I don't have to maintain the documentation.
Most of it.
Well, just reflect over the DLL and then pull out the public methods and their signatures and
Yeah.
ta-da.
That's what Swagger's for.
Swagger doesn't work on NuGet packages.
Any other questions for Mark?
You're
Right.
all, you're all right.
Well, thank you. For the giveaway this week or this month, we have SQL Server 2019 revealed from A-Press. Everybody but Aaron have a ticket. Anybody missing? Going once? I'll let you do the honors.
So this time we'll get one, huh?
No.
259.
259. Last three, 259.
5-6.
Are you a SQL Server guy? You are now?
Best way to become one.
All right. Thanks, Martin. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Thanks, Bank at the Ozarks Innovation Lab for providing the space. Thank you, Robert Half, for providing pizza. We will either be back here next month or Suncoast Developers Guild, so we want to kind of get a feel for what people enjoy, where you want to be, what spaces we.
Where is that? Suncoast Real?
Just right down Central.
It's upstairs? Is it upstairs?
Yeah, upstairs.
Okay.
Yeah, so we will be there at Suncoast Developers Guild in March. We've got Carl Franklin coming in
Wow.
from .NET Rocks podcast. He's going to be doing his Glazer Roadshow. So we'll be a special night and time at Suncoast Developers Guild. So be sure to follow us on Meetup and be sure to RSVP for that. We'll have special giveaways he's got a sponsor covering his whole roadshow. So we're really excited about that. Still looking for additional speakers, topics. If you've got anything you're interested in, let us know. We'll try to make it happen. If you want to volunteer to speak, we would love that. If you want to volunteer someone else to speak, we'll take that as well. With that, I'm John Calloway. That is Clayton Hunt. And we will run down to probably